I won millions in the lottery and decided not to tell anyone. I asked my family for help as a test. Only one person lent me a hand. I'm 35 years old. I live in Ohio, and until a few months ago, I was just another guy trying to survive on a mediocre salary and putting up with humiliation at work. My family never saw me as someone valuable. I have 2 brothers and a sister. My parents always treated my older brother, Ryan, as the pride of the family. He started a marketing company with their financial support and lives his life showing off how successful he is. My younger sister, Emily, has 2 children, works as a cashier at a supermarket, and can barely pay her rent. And my other brother, Aaron, constantly changes jobs and still lives with my parents, despite being 30 years old. I was always the forgotten middle child. My parents never offered me support or help with anything. When I was laid off at 26, they didn't even offer me a couch to sleep on. When I needed money to fix my car so I could keep going to work, Ryan told me, his exact words, that sometimes it's better to accept that some people are born to stay where they are. Earlier this year, I won the lottery. It wasn't a crazy amount like 300 million, but it was enough to completely change the life of an ordinary person. A little over $18 million after taxes. I was in shock for weeks. I hired a lawyer, put together an investment strategy with an advisor, and kept everything an absolute secret. I continued living in the same place, going to work, faking normalcy. But something started to eat at me from the inside, the way my family had treated me all these years, always ignored, always seen as a nuisance. So, before making any major decisions, I decided to run a test. I quit my job. I made up a story that the company I worked for had gone bankrupt and that I was going through financial difficulties. I said I had overdue bills, that my car had broken down, and that I wouldn't be able to pay the rent that month. I went to see my parents, Ryan, and Aaron. They all listened to me. Some of them laughed uncomfortably. Ryan said he could offer me a position as a warehouse assistant in his company, but that I would have to prove my worth. He offered me a few dollars an hour. My parents said they were tight on expenses, despite having a secure retirement and no debt. Aaron just said, "Tough situation, bro." The only one who really helped me was Emily. She gave me $200, and it was so much more than money. It was the way she gave it to me. She asked if I had food, offered me the sofa in her tiny house. She said I could count on her. I know she barely survives with 2 small children. That broke me inside, in a good way. After that, I started to distance myself from everyone. Only Emily knew where I was living. I moved and began to change my life. On the outside, everything looked the same. On the inside, I had a new perspective. I started to observe and to plan. I don't know exactly why I'm writing this now. Maybe because I'm preparing to take the next step, or because I'm still trying to understand why my own family always saw me as disposable. I have this constant feeling that even now, after everything I know and everything I have, I'm still that ignored guy at the family table. I haven't told anyone I won the lottery, but I think the time to change that is approaching. I began to plan my definitive exit from that circle, not just from the life I was leading, but from the image my family had of me. I started studying more about investments. I bought a discreet house in a quiet neighborhood in my name, but I used a legal intermediary to maintain anonymity. I renovated everything little by little, without showing off. I got rid of the old car but bought another one that looked very similar, only new and safer. Anyone looking at me from the outside would think I had simply gotten a new, stable job. During that time, Emily kept sending me messages, asking if I needed anything, offering me food when she had leftovers. She never asked me for a cent and never directly asked what I was working on. She just said she trusted me. That marked me in a way that's hard to explain. One day, without warning, Ryan showed up at my old apartment building. The doorman sent me a message saying a man in a suit was there, demanding to know where I was. I found it strange, but I ignored it. A week later, my mother called. She said Ryan was going around saying that I was being irresponsible, that I had abandoned the family, that I was missing out of pride. She ended the call by telling me, "What you're doing to your older brother, who has always been an example, isn't fair." I swallowed hard. Until that moment, I was still considering maybe helping my parents with more than just the basics. After that, I started to reevaluate everything. They were concerned about Ryan's emotional well-being, not mine. Not for a second did they ask if I was eating, where I was sleeping, if I was sick or in crisis. I continued for a few more months, observing from a distance. Ryan's company seemed to be doing well, but I started noticing certain signs. Constant ads for temporary jobs, moving the office to a cheaper building, fewer social media posts showing business trips. I investigated. I discovered that he had lost a large contract with a national company, that his debts to suppliers had doubled, and that he was resorting to personal loans to keep up appearances. I remained silent. Meanwhile, I was discreetly hiring people. I founded my own consulting firm focused on small family businesses seeking financial restructuring. Everything was done carefully, with good professionals, no rush. In 6 months, we already had 3 regular clients and a good cash flow. One of the first employees I hired was Eric, a former coworker who always gave me a ride without ever charging me a cent. I remember when he told me, "You don't have to pay for gas, just pay me with a good conversation." A truly decent guy. I invited him to work with me as a logistics supervisor. He almost cried when he saw the salary. "Are you sure I'm worth all this?" he asked me. And I just replied, "I'm sure you're worth even more." I assigned him a new company car and told him to choose the model. He hugged me and was speechless for almost a full minute. When I felt that everything was in its place, I decided to visit Emily. I went to her house on a Friday afternoon. She was on the porch tending to her plants while the kids played with a bucket of water in the yard. When she saw me, she smiled so calmly. I sat down, had coffee with her, played with my nephews, and then I asked to speak with her in private. I told her everything. I told her about the lottery, about the test, about how she had been the only one to lend me a hand without expecting anything in return. She was silent for a moment, then looked at me and said, "I didn't do it expecting anything. I did it because I love you and because I know what it feels like to be treated like you're trash." The next day, I took her to see 3 houses. She chose the simplest one, the one with a yard for the kids and an old iron stove. I bought it in cash and gave her a new car. She chose a used model, only asking that it had space to take the kids, and I started paying for my nephew's schooling in full. I also offered her a position in my company as operations manager. At first, she refused, thinking she wasn't prepared, but then she accepted on one condition: "You have to teach me everything properly. I want to do it right." Meanwhile, Ryan was getting more and more entangled. He sent me a message for the first time in almost a year. It was direct. "Do you know anyone who can help me? The company is in a bad mess and I need an investor or I'll have to sell." I replied, "Let's talk." We met at a coffee shop near downtown. Ryan arrived with the same old pose. Expensive suit, shiny watch, forced smile, but this time something was different. He looked smaller. Tired. He talked for half an hour about the market crisis. He blamed the government. He said he had done everything right and just needed a little push to get back on track. When he finished, he looked at me and blurted out, "You still have contacts in the financial area. I seem to remember you talking about some acquaintances. Do you think you could recommend someone who wants to buy the company or invest in a part of it?" I looked at him for a few seconds. I didn't tell him anything about what I already knew. I just said, "Maybe I could buy it myself." He laughed in my face and said, "You buy it, bro. I don't know if you'd have the money for that. You never had money. But if you know someone who wants to invest. I only came to you because you said you knew some investors at the company where you used to work." Then I opened my bank account on my phone and showed it to him. The smile vanished from his face instantly. I told him everything, and he asked to borrow money. I said no, but that I was interested in buying the company. Since he needed to sell quickly or he would lose everything, he agreed to try to sell it to me. He named an absurd price. I replied that it wouldn't be like that, that an evaluation would be done and I would only pay the real value of the company at that moment. He seemed surprised but quickly switched to salesman mode. He showed me spreadsheets, talked about potential, tried to inflate what was clearly sinking. I asked him to send me all the information by email and told him I would respond in a few days. I took the material to my lawyers and the analysis team. The diagnosis was clear. The company wouldn't last more than 2 months, but it had structure, a name in the market, and could be recovered with serious changes. We closed the purchase for a symbolic value. I could have let the company go bankrupt and bought the remains for almost nothing, but I made sure to make it clear in the contract that the company would be 100% mine. And Ryan, if he wanted to stay, would have to submit to the new management and accept the position I assigned him. He accepted, not because he wanted to, but because he had no other choice. The following week, I called a meeting with all the remaining employees. We had a general assembly. I introduced Emily as the new administrative manager. I said she would report directly to me and announced a restructuring plan with the elimination of redundant positions, including Ryan's old role, which was basically an empty title with a huge salary. He was demoted to a commercial analyst with targets and supervision. He remained silent during the meeting. He didn't even look at me, but the message was clear. Since then, he arrives at work every day at 8 a.m., clocks in, attends meetings. He doesn't talk much, avoids any conversation that isn't strictly professional. The spark in his eyes has disappeared. The arrogance too. Some colleagues have commented that he has changed. I don't respond, I don't explain, I just observe. My parents called me a few days later, indignant. They said I was humiliating my own brother, that he needed support, not punishment. I asked them if either of them remembered the last time they asked me how I was. Silence. Then my mother murmured something like, "He has always been very sensitive. Since then, I only keep up with his health insurance payments. Nothing more. I don't cut the tie, but I don't deepen any connection either." They realized that the cord that tied me to that old dynamic had been cut. Aaron tried to get close again as soon as he heard about the company purchase. He sent me a message saying he was proud and that he always believed in me. He offered to help with whatever I needed. I politely declined, leaving no room for doubt. Eric, the colleague who gave me rides, is still the supervisor. He adapted well, became one of the most respected members of the team. He never demanded anything, never sucked up, he just works with dedication and treats everyone with respect. I gave him a generous bonus after the first semester. He came to thank me and said, "You're changing lives, man." And I replied, "I'm trying to change mine. The rest is a consequence." Sometimes, when I think about all this, I feel a lump in my chest. It's not happiness or anger. It's a strange feeling, between relief and emptiness, as if I had waited so long for a type of recognition that in the end meant nothing. And when it was my turn to have power, I realized that what I really wanted wasn't revenge, it was respect. And that either comes genuinely or it's worthless. On Emily's birthday, I took my nephews to a water park. It was the first time I saw those kids laugh without a care in the world, eat what they wanted, without hearing, "no," all the time. She hugged me at the end of the day and said that was more than any gift. "You gave them a childhood that I could never give them." That hit me deep. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something right, not out of revenge, but for someone who always believed in me when no one else did. Update 1. The news that I had bought the company spread faster than I expected. It wasn't because I said anything. Someone from the old team posted a photo of the new ID badge with my name as CEO and tagged the location. Within days, I started receiving messages from distant cousins, old schoolmates, even people who used to ignore me at family barbecues. All happy for me, all remembering how hardworking I was. My mother sent me a message asking if she could mention it in her church group, that her son now owned a company. She said it would raise the family's name. I replied with a, "Do what you think is best," but inside, it turned my stomach. Ryan remained silent, but he began to change his tone at work. He became more helpful, more present. He even tried to praise one of Emily's presentations during a meeting. It was a forced compliment, somewhat mechanical, but it was there. I didn't respond. Neither did Emily. She simply continued speaking with the same firmness as always. Some employees started to notice the atmosphere and came to ask me what was happening. I just said, "Restructuring." That's all. The tension really escalated when Ryan found out he would lose the company car. It was an Audi leased under the old management's name and was on the list of cuts. I sent him a formal email informing him that he had 1 month to return it. He came to my office with the paper in his hand, saying, "This is personal, isn't it?" I looked at him steadily and said calmly, "No, this is management." He turned red, shook his head, and stormed out, slamming the door, but he returned the car within the deadline. 2 days later, my mother called me crying. She said I was destroying her son, that he was down, that all of this was out of pride on my part. I listened to everything in silence. In the end, I said, "Mom, did you know that Ryan never offered me help when I was unemployed? That he laughed at me in front of others, that he told me some people are born to be mediocre?" She went silent, then whispered, "He shouldn't have said that." "But he did. And you never defended me." She hung up without saying anything else. The following week, Aaron showed up at the company unannounced. He tried to hug me. He said he was there to contribute. He mentioned he had taken a technical course and was ready to start over. I asked him to leave a resume at the reception and follow the normal channels. He didn't like that. He said family should have priority. I replied, "The priority here is for the one who respected me when I had nothing." Emily heard everything from the next room. When he left, she came in, looked at me, and said, "You did the right thing." They never understood that respect doesn't begin when the money appears. And that was exactly it. In the following days, rumors began to circulate within the company that I had only managed to buy the business because someone must have helped me from the outside, or that I was just a front for a real investor. Someone even said that maybe I was involved in gambling. When that reached my ears, I got straight to the point. I gathered all the leaders for an alignment meeting. I showed the documents, the contracts, the values, not to justify myself, but to make it clear that everything there was my merit and my decision, that there was no ghost behind it, just someone who spent years being underestimated and decided to use what he had learned. Ryan was in the room. He didn't say a word, just stared at the floor. After that meeting, the atmosphere changed. Some began to look at me with more respect, others with fear. I wanted neither, I just wanted professionalism. One afternoon, I ran into Ryan in the hallway. He seemed to hesitate, but then he stopped and said, "You got lucky, but you knew how to take advantage of it. I'll give you that." I looked at him for a few seconds. I could have thrown everything in his face. Years of humiliation, contempt, arrogance. But I just said, "The luck was not having to depend on you." He nodded, somewhat ashamed, and continued walking. That Saturday, I went to visit Emily again. I brought some toys for the kids and a toolkit for her new husband, whom I still didn't know well but who had proven to be a decent, hard-working man. He greeted me with a somewhat suspicious expression, but seeing the kids run to hug me, he seemed to relax. Emily took me aside and said, "He thought you were one of those arrogant millionaires who forget where they come from." I replied, "I haven't forgotten. I just learned not to go back to where I was never wanted." She laughed and told me I could come over whenever I wanted. I stayed until dark, having dinner with them on the patio, the kids splashing their feet in a little inflatable pool. For the first time in a long time, I felt part of something real, simple, without masks. On Sunday, I received an unexpected call. My father. He rarely called, he was always quieter, more distant. He asked if he could stop by the company to talk. I asked what about. He hesitated and replied, "About the family." I agreed, but on the condition that it would be outside of business hours and that the conversation would be direct. No speeches. He showed up on Monday. He walked in with that same tough attitude as always, but he seemed nervous. He sat in front of me and was silent for almost a minute. Then he said, "We were very wrong about you, and I'm only just now realizing it." I remained silent. He continued, "I always thought you were weak, too sensitive, but you were the only one who didn't fall, the only one who didn't break. And now you're the one lifting everyone up." My eyes welled up, but I held it in. I replied, "I'm not lifting anyone up, Dad. I'm just giving back what I received. Whoever gave me support got something in return. Whoever turned their back on me reaped what they sowed." He nodded. Then he asked if I could help with the house's mortgage because they were having difficulties. I told him no, but that the health insurance would continue to be paid and that I would cover any medical emergency as long as it was real. He didn't insist. He stood up, said, "Thank you for what you're already doing," and left. The following week, Ryan asked to speak with me. It was something I didn't expect. He said he wanted to talk frankly. We met in an empty conference room at the end of the day. He began by saying he hadn't been sleeping well for months, that he lived with the feeling of being in debt, not just financially, but also in his attitude. He said he felt like a failure for having lost the company that our father always used as the example of the son who made it, and that now he worked for me, the brother he had spent his life belittling. I listened. It seemed genuine, but my mind couldn't stop remembering every time he laughed at me, ignored me in public, called me a drag. When he finished, he said, "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know that I know. I know what I did to you." I replied that I wasn't there to punish anyone, but that I also wasn't going to pretend nothing happened, that what he was feeling now was the weight I had carried my whole life, and that if he wanted to stay there, he would have to follow the same rules as anyone else. Not one step more, not one privilege, just work. He nodded. He said he had already understood. Since then, he has been more reserved, but also more efficient. He meets deadlines. He's not late, he doesn't complain. Sometimes I still see him avert his gaze when he passes near me. Maybe shame, maybe fear of making another mistake. Aaron, on the other hand, insisted again. He showed up at a company barbecue, uninvited, trying to talk to everyone, making forced jokes, saying he always believed in my potential. I watched him from a distance trying to fit in. Some colleagues were kind, but you could tell no one was buying his act. In the end, he approached me with a smile that was too big and blurted out, "Bro, we should get closer. We're getting old, aren't we?" I replied calmly, "You had your whole life to get closer. It's too late now to force things." He was left speechless. He tried to laugh it off but left early. Since then, he's disappeared again. The usual. My mother sent me a long email saying she missed me, that she wanted to get the family together for Christmas. She said it was important not to let resentment win, but she never mentioned the things she herself said or ignored all those years. There was no apology, just an invitation disguised as reconciliation. I didn't reply and I didn't go. Instead, I spent Christmas with Emily and her family. I brought toys for the kids. I cooked with her husband. We spent the night in the living room watching movies with popcorn. It was simple, but it was the first time in years that I ended the night without feeling that emptiness that always came after a family event. Update 2. The most concrete change happened about 2 months ago. Ryan was summoned to a meeting with an important client. I let him lead the presentation. I wanted to see how much he had learned. During the conversation, he remained professional, but at a certain point, he tried to inflate numbers and make promises we hadn't aligned with the team. The client noticed and called me aside afterward, asking if it was trustworthy to continue the project with someone who distorted metrics. That hurt me deeply. I wasn't willing to risk the company's reputation, and even less so Emily's, who led the entire operational side, for my brother's ego. That same day, I called a meeting with him, Emily, and Human Resources. I was direct. I explained what happened, its consequences, and what I expected from someone in his position. He tried to justify it by saying he was trying to impress. I interrupted him and said that was unacceptable. Starting that week, Ryan was demoted. He no longer had responsibilities in external negotiations and was put in charge of internal reports only. The new position came with a salary reduction, still a decent wage, but well below what he earned before. He signed the papers with a serious face. He didn't argue, only asked that I not say anything to our parents. I asked him to leave the room. Then I looked at Emily and asked, "Do you think I went too far?" She replied, "No, you were fair, and justice is something they never gave you." But even with all that, what moved me the most was something else. The following week, one of the new interns, a humble kid just over 20, always quiet, stopped me in the hallway and asked if he could talk to me. I thought he was going to quit or complain about something, but he just said, "I wanted to thank you. I never thought I would work in a place where people like me have a voice, where a black woman like the manager has real power. Emily is an inspiration for my mom, and you are too for giving her the space." I was speechless. He said goodbye and left. I went into my office, closed the door, and cried. It wasn't anger or relief. It was a release of years of invisibility. It was realizing that I had finally managed to create something they never gave me, an environment where no one had to kneel to be seen. After that, I started to adjust some things in the company. I improved the employees' health plan, created an emergency fund for collaborators in difficult situations, and gave Emily full autonomy to lead local social projects using part of the quarterly profits. Ryan remained silent. He watched everything with that look I already knew, between bitterness and regret. He knew the game had changed and that he was now just another piece on a board he once thought he completely controlled. Over time, Ryan's presence in the company became almost invisible. He did what he had to, didn't meddle where he didn't belong, and rarely exchanged more than 3 sentences with me. I knew he felt humiliated, but unlike what he did to me my whole life, I never responded with mockery. I just maintained a distance, cold, but fair. It was around that time that my mother showed up at the reception unannounced. Emily sent me a message, "Your mom is here. She says she needs to talk to you." She was insistent. I went down there. She was sitting with that face of someone who wants to appear fragile to get something. She stood up quickly when she saw me. "Can we talk for a minute?" "Just the 2 of us." I took her to a small meeting room. She started with the same old speech, family, unity, forgiveness, how important I was to everyone. I waited for the real part, and of course, it came. She and my father were having trouble keeping the house, accumulated bills, a late mortgage, and a real risk of losing the property. I spoke to her calmly, telling her that I was already paying for their health insurance and would continue to cover medical emergencies, but that I was not going to pay for decisions they themselves had made. She cried. She said it was hard to see a son refuse help, and I replied, what was hard was being treated as invisible for 30 years. I learned to live without your affection. Now you will learn to live without my money. She stood there in shock. She tried to argue, but I stood up and opened the door. The conversation ends here. She left without looking back. In the following days, comments began to circulate among some distant relatives. They said it had gone to my head, that money doesn't change character, it only reveals it, that I was ungrateful, that I was playing the boss. I heard this from a cousin at a shared lunch. I laughed. I asked her what she knew about my story. She stammered. She said it wasn't personal. I replied, then keep your mouth shut about my life. Emily found out later and sent me a message, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Just live your life. The rest is noise. I've been thinking a lot about that. Maybe the hardest part of all this isn't the money or the changes. It's realizing that you spend your life wanting to be seen by your own family, and when you finally achieve it, it's already too late for that connection to be sincere. Because then what they see isn't you, it's the bank account, it's what you can give. I didn't want to become my brother's boss, I just wanted to be treated as an equal, as someone with value. But maybe that was never within my reach. Maybe I spent too much time trying to earn a type of love that never existed. A week later, I received an envelope at home with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from my father, 3 pages long. It started by talking about when I was a kid, remembering things I honestly didn't think he would have noticed. My first science fair win. The day I broke my arm at school and cried alone because he was late to the hospital. Then he said he was proud of me, but that he was raised to believe that a man who shows feeling raises weak children, and that this became a rule within him, even when it hurt. And then came the expected part, the request. He said he was ashamed to ask, but that if I could help with the mortgage, he and my mother could grow old with dignity. I folded the letter, put it away, and didn't reply. Not out of revenge, but because at that point I had understood that any help from me would always be accompanied by the expectation of automatic redemption. They didn't want to build something new, just to return to the position of control they had lost, and that wasn't going to happen. In that same month, Emily received an offer to take on an executive position at a competing company. Better salary, more benefits. When she came to tell me, I thought she was going to say she would accept, but she told me she had rejected it. I don't trade dignity for money. Here, I have a voice, I have a purpose, and I work with someone who truly trusts me. That's priceless. I almost cried right then and there. I stayed silent, just nodded, and gave her a raise the following month with an included bonus. It was the least I could do. On the company's anniversary, we had a simple event, just for the team. Real food, no corporate nonsense. At the moment of the toast, it was Emily who spoke. She talked about the beginning, about how the company was built by someone no one believed in, not even his own family, and how it was now a space where no one had to beg to be heard. People applauded. Some even got emotional. I stood there with the glass in my hand, my heart beating fast. I looked around and saw faces that once barely greeted me, now treating this as a personal victory. I saw respect, not fear, not flattery, the kind of respect that doesn't come with a last name or inherited fame. That night, I left later. I sat in my car in the parking lot, looking at the building. I thought about everything that had happened since that first day I asked for help and only received excuses and contempt. And I also thought about everything I still wanted to build, not to prove anything, but to give space to people who were also ignored. Update 3. Today, almost 2 years after it all began, I still have the same cell phone number. I still drive an ordinary car. I still wear simple clothes, but inside, I have completely changed. I am no longer the guy who needed others' approval to feel he was worth something. I know what I've built, and I know who I can count on. Ryan is still at the company, now as a process analyst. He does his job competently, without errors, but the shine, that air of superiority, has disappeared. Sometimes he looks at me like someone still trying to understand how the scales tipped. The difference is that now he speaks to me with respect, not because I demand it, but because for the first time, he sees someone he never really knew how to look at. My parents still live in the same house. They pay the minimum on the mortgage, they live on just enough. I don't interfere. Their health insurance is guaranteed, and that's it. Contact is rare. Sometimes a message on my birthday, another at the end of the year. I respond politely, but it doesn't go beyond that. They lost the right to participate in my life the moment they decided I didn't deserve attention when I needed it most. Aaron has completely disappeared. I heard he tried to open a supplement store and it went bankrupt in less than 6 months. He hasn't shown up again or tried to get close. And he's not missed. Emily is still the heart of the company. She has grown. She graduated from an online university at night, fully paid for by me, and today she is respected by the entire team. Her children proudly call me uncle. Sometimes they send me drawings saying I'm the hero of their mom's work. I keep them all in a drawer. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if no one had helped me back then. Maybe I would have left for good. But one person saw me when no one else did, and it was for her, and for people like her, that I decided to move forward. Today, I don't have a perfect family, but I have peace, and that is worth more than any prize.